It's a fresh start, a clean slate. The Sacramento Kings have battled back to a 500 record, and now 9 of their next 11 games will be played inside of the Golden One Center. This is the most important season deciding stretch of the year for the Kings. And Frankie Cartoscelli of SacTown Sports 1140 joins me to break it all down right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And why do I say that this is the most important stretch of the season? It's not just a hot, catchy title to get you to click on this podcast. I truly believe it is because this is a stretch where the Sacramento Kings can either reinsert themselves into the conversation that we believe they should have been a part of this season, which is firmly in that playoff mix in the West, or if the Kings aren't there yet, if the Kings don't end up in a better position, I shouldn't say well above 500, but definitely above 500 and in that playoff mix, which they're not even in the play-in mix right now. If by the end of this stretch, with so many games at home, when the strength of schedule gets more and more and more difficult for the Kings after this point, if the Kings don't take advantage of this opportunity now, we could be seeing cause for drastic moves and drastic changes. I'm not saying guys necessarily losing their jobs like Monty McNair or Mike Brown yet. But in terms of a big kind of knee-jerk, all-in, swing for the fences trade or some panic in that sense, if the Kings don't handle their business right now, that might be where we end up at. Frankie Cartoscelli from SacTown Sports 1140 joins me right now, and we'll talk about this more. Also talk about which Kings stars need to do more and how much the Kings can survive and afford having their core being their starting five and their bench being decimated. Basically nothing. Inconsistent. Frankie and I break it all down right here on Locked On Kings. Much to the excitement of Frankie Cartoscelli, we will be seeing each other a lot this month because the Sacramento Kings play a boatload of home games this month and going into 2025. Of course, Frankie, nice enough to join me back here on Locked On Kings. My man, they're back to 500. They finally beat the New Orleans Pelicans, which I almost think is parade worthy, even if the Pelicans are one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the NBA right now. And now they look at this stretch where 9 of their next 11 games are inside of the Golden One Center. Obviously, this season has not gone according to plan, but this team battled back. They're at 500. They're playing better basketball. Here is this opportunity in their own building to finally build upon this momentum and reinsert themselves into this Western Conference playoff race. To me, Frankie, I wouldn't be surprised if we get to the end of the season and we look back at this stretch and it's the most important kind of deciding stretch of the year. Who are the Sacramento Kings going to be? Plus, I think there might be some significant decisions with the front office made based upon how this stretch of games go. So am I over-exaggerating and overhyping this stretch as calling it the most important stretch of the season for the Sacramento Kings? Not just for now. I'm talking the entire season, period.
No, first, Matt, thanks for having me back on, man. Of course, we don't see each other enough already. We're going to be seeing each other, like you said, a lot more. But no, I think you nailed it right on the head. I think that when you look at the upcoming schedule, I think 8 of the next 9 are at home. They don't leave the state of California again until January 10th. So we're talking about a month, really, where these guys are going to be able to be home, get practices in, get acclimated with each other, get family time and be home for Christmas, which I've heard is a huge thing for the team this year after being away for Thanksgiving the past couple of years. So no excuses there. And then also from the home aspect of things, you have to take care of business at home. I mean, how often have we had conversations on here or off of here when we're just, having dinner in the media dining room about how the Kings have it's like they have such a great home court advantage, but they don't at the same time. Like the atmosphere at Golden One Center is so special. And opposing media and fans will say the same thing, and players, that they think it's a really special place there at Golden One Center, and the Kings just can't take advantage of it. So 8-9 at home, some winnable, quote unquote, winnable matchups coming up. Like you mentioned, the Pelicans game last night, even though they're missing a lot of talent, things got a little dicey there at the end of the game, but still found a way to pull it out, and a win's a win. The Kings have won 4 or 5, but like you said, 8-9 at home. January 10th is when they go on the road again, and then they go on a little East Coast swing. Trade deadline's a couple weeks after that. So I do feel like this will be like that stretch you look back and say, okay, how many of this upcoming 9 did they get? The Lakers twice, 3 times, I guess, in those 9 games. You have the Detroit Pistons, who have been kind of hot and cold this year, better than last year, but not really a team that should beat a playoff football team like the Kings. There's too many games coming up. The Pacers are in there as well, a team that's really struggled as of late. This is the time for the Kings to assert themselves and really be a team that we all expect them to be, which is a top 6 team in the West.
Yeah, and in this 11-game stretch that I'm highlighting, 5 games are against opponents that are directly ahead of you in the standings between the 11th/12th spot, which you're in right now, kind of flip-flopping with the San Antonio Spurs, and the 5th spot, which is held by the Golden State Warriors. And the Kings are only 2 games back of the 5th spot. Now, there's a bunch of teams in between them and that spot, of course, so it's not like 2 games is going to be easy for them to make up with all those teams there. But you have 5 games against teams directly ahead of you in the standings, so you beat them, a good chance to either catch them, flip-flop, or just close that gap. And then 3 other games against teams that are under 500 in the Eastern Conference. And these are games that the Kings historically have not won when they're supposed to, especially with so many of them being in their gym, including the dreaded Detroit Pistons game that's coming up here in just a little bit. Like, the Kings need to handle their business here. You have an opportunity to make up ground in the West directly against teams in the West that are ahead of you, and you have an opportunity to take advantage of the bottom feeders of a predominantly weak conference in the East. And I don't think that's insulting to say. It's very clear the West is on a complete different tier than the East, and the best teams in the West not only handle their business out West, but they make sure to handle their business when one of those weaker Eastern teams comes to play. So 8 games right there. I'm not saying the Kings have to go 8-0 during those, but 8 key games that could have drastic impact on where the Kings are in the standings. These are opportunities that the Kings just can't let go to waste.
Yeah, and how many times over the years have we seen them do just that, team? I mean, even last year, I'm looking at the Pacers game where they were missing Tyrese Halliburton. They just traded for Pascal Siakam. They traded away several key players in that trade to Toronto, and the Kings got rolled at home. And even last night was a case where, one more CJ McCollum triple, we're having a completely different conversation today. But that's a fine line, and that's the NBA, that's basketball, that's sports, really. I mean, the Kings can't really look at it and, what's done is done. They have everything out in front of them. I almost was going to make a call back to, it's a Yankees thing, Matt. You wouldn't get it, but Aaron Boone with the Yankees, he always says it's right in front of us. They lost, I think, they lost 10 of, 13 games last year, and just kept saying the same thing every night, right in front of us. Well, for the Kings, it really is, though. It's right in front of them. Even as bad as that start to the year was, they were 4 games under 500, the 3-point shooting being as bad as it was, the ball movement not being crisp, the lineup changes. Here we are, December 13th. The Kings are 500. They have a chance to really take advantage of a stretch here. So I do think it's those favorable matchups that you pointed out that are going to be huge, but also the teams around them, like the Lakers, the Nuggets, who have not really been the Nuggets we're accustomed to as of late. The Kings went 3-4 against them last year. Granted, they were missing, a key player or two in most of those games, except for the final one at the end of the year. But it's no excuses here. The Kings really should take care of business. They're as healthy as they probably have been all year. They're missing Trey Lyles right now, but from a health standpoint, that's not really an excuse anymore either. So to quote the great Aaron Boone, it's right in front of them.
Let's talk about a good team now. We'll focus on the Sacramento Kings and not the New York Yankees, who just lost Juan Soto. Happy to point that out to you, Frankie.
No comment. No comment.
I don't think anybody's seat is particularly hot. If anyone, I think, should be lukewarm compared to the other, I think it's Monty McNair more than Mike Brown. But again, I don't think it's a conversation to be had right now. But I do think that this is a stretch where if things don't go well, if the Sacramento Kings go even just 500 over this stretch of games, I think we're going to see a drastic decision being made. But I don't think that decision is people losing jobs. I think that decision is Monty pulling the trigger on some kind of trade. I really do think there's the potential for a potentially season-altering gamble or change or move if over these next couple of weeks the Sacramento Kings don't start to handle business. I don't think the Kings can afford to wait. That's why I say this is the most important stretch of the season. Here is your time to strike because you have one of the most difficult schedules throughout the remainder of this year. You have some significant road trips coming up at the end of this homestand as you get into 2025. And then the All-Star break and the NBA trade deadline is going to be on us before we even know it. So this is the time of year where decisions are going to have to be made depending upon how the Kings perform.
Yeah, we were having this conversation with Alan Stiles and Brendan Nunez yesterday that Brendan kind of has gotten caught in his tracks a couple of times, and we kind of laughed about it, how he sat there with Alan. And Alan, if anyone knows Alan Stiles, he's quick with the trade machine. He's always bringing up the trade machine whenever we have a conversation at the media, the dining table. He's pulling out crazy out-of-pocket trades.
He needs to be stopped. He has a
little bit of a problem. But to his point, he alluded to the fact that Brendan said last year, around the same time of year, that it maybe isn't time for Monte McNair to make that all-in gamble, that move where you're leveraging draft picks, the future of the organization. Now this year, a little bit different tone. Everyone's a year older. De'Aaron Fox is going to be on a expiring contract going into next year. Domantas Sabonis is going to be entering his age 30 season, I think, year after next. DeMar DeRozan's 35. I mean, Keegan Murray is going to be on the last year of his rookie scale contract. If you really do believe in this core, and as others have pointed to, Sam Amick was on with Dave and Jason yesterday saying how the feeling is that this organization still believes in this core. If that's true, this is probably going to be the time. Like you mentioned, seats aren't really hot yet, but they're warm. And if there's a warmest seat right now, it's under Monte McNair. He has to make a move and kind of round out this roster. We've seen this core remain largely intact since the beginning of that 2022-23 season. And outside of the DeRozan Barnes swap, it really is the same rotation 1 through 6. You have your Fox, Sabonis, Murray, Herter, Monk, like good core. Very good, we've seen, but not to the level where they need to be, which is winning a playoff series. And that's the next step for this team. Can they get back to the postseason? Can they win a playoff series for the first time since 2004? I feel like that's the way that ownership and Vivek Ranadive are going to grade this season. They don't want to see this team be complacent and spin its wheels. So, like to your point, it could be time pretty soon to hit that button. And it's always scary when you leverage the future and part with draft picks. But if not now, when? That's the question is, if not now, I don't know when that's going to happen.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Gametime. This is the app that you need to be using to buy your tickets to any event, whether it's a Sacramento Kings game and sporting event, a concert at a smaller venue, or a massive stadium concert like something at Levi Stadium, a theatrical production in downtown Sacramento, a comedy show, whatever it is, Gametime has those tickets for you. And they have this Gametime Picks feature, which whatever event you're looking for, it does the work for you. It sifts through, it goes through all of the hundreds or thousands of tickets that may be available and helps you identify the best deals at different areas at different price points so you can find exactly what you are looking for. Their seat views are second to none, right? If you're worried about what the stage looks like from the nosebleeds at Levi Stadium during a Taylor Swift or Coldplay concert or something like that, you'll know exactly what the view is going to be like. Or if you've never been to the Golden One Center for a Kings game, you can see exactly what your view of the court will be. They also have the lowest price guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find the same tickets for a better price on a different site. I promise you, you're not going to. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. At this point, your core is your starting lineup. Like that was why I felt Mike Brown starting Malik Monk was a move that had to happen, but it also was kind of the last major card that the Kings had to play. And thank goodness it's working. I think the Kings are 4-2 in the 6 games where Malik Monk has started. And even more important than him starting, I think he's getting starting caliber minutes. He's playing 30+ minutes a night. And when he does that, his numbers are superb. And the Sacramento Kings, more often than not, are winning ball games. So that was the ace up Mike's sleeve that he was very reluctant to play, but he's played it and it's worked. But I don't know where the roster as constructed goes from here. And what that has led to is the Kings starting five is their core. We believe they're really, really good. They have a lot of weapons. You look at this bench and it's just nothing. Like it's Kevin Huerter, who's had some good games. He struggled last night, but that's fine. He's had some good games. Keon Ellis, who's been in and out of the rotation, dealing with some mistakes that he's made on the floor that Mike is holding him accountable for, as well as trying to pick up a lot of the defensive responsibilities that he still has while spacing the floor. Trey Lyles has been in and out of the lineup for the last 2 years with injury, never really has been the same player since he got paid. And then after that, it's a bunch of fringe NBA players, if we're being completely honest. So is the move to look for another big name to add to the core, or is the move to look for a name or two to bolster that second unit? I don't know. At this point, I feel like this bolstering the second unit is the logical path to take if the Kings are looking to explore the trade market. I just don't know what realistic game-changing pieces they can get there for the pieces they're willing to trade away. And as much as we want to say, just go out and get a 3-and-D wing, go out and get guys with size. Every team covets depth at the wing. Every team covets depth of 6'9", 6'10 guys with 7-foot wingspans. So those guys aren't necessarily growing on trees or out there easy to find.
Yeah, it does seem like the most likely scenario is they look to bolster the bench, and even as of right now, they're 27th in the league in bench points per game. That was going to take a hit when Malik Monk got moved in the starting lineup, and Kevin Huerter's shown flashes. He's had some good performances lately, which is a good sign. But at the same time, like you said, if the Kings are going to make a move to kind of round out that roster, Kevin Huerter is probably the number one name that's going to have to be moved as far as a salary match standpoint. And the team that's at the front of everyone's minds right now, and by everyone, I mean everyone, is Brooklyn. And the Kings aren't the only team trying to talk to Brooklyn about Dorian Finney-Smith or Cam Johnson. And Cam Johnson for sure would take, a big haul. It'd take multiple players, probably multiple picks, I'd imagine at this point, because that price is going to get jacked up. But Finney-Smith is a player where maybe it's a little cheaper and more attainable for the Kings to acquire him. But I do wonder if we're going to get to a point where only a certain amount of teams are selling, and the Nets have the most, shiny objects or shiny, players to trade away. How much of a corner the Kings going to get backed into on price? Because they have assets, but they don't have as many assets as some other teams around the league do. And you've seen so far about some other teams that have kind of peeked their heads in, like Golden State's trying to be aggressive right now and maximize the end of Stephen Curry's career, which, doesn't seem like he's slowing down, but he's going to be 37 years old or is 37 years old. So they want to maximize that window. Other teams in the league, like Houston, will probably be aggressive. I mean, there's countless teams that are going to try to be in the mix and trade off assets. So it's going to be intriguing to see what the Kings do. But I think it's more of a situation where Monty McNair is going to try to, like you said, round out this roster, add a couple of bench pieces if they could. Because really, if you think about it, if they added a couple of bench players, they have a really good. The Kings have a good team. Like their starting five is great. They really grade out well in a lot of metrics. Net rating, offensive rating, even defensive rating. The Kings have been a top half of the NBA defensive team this year, which I think we all were asking for over the past couple of years. They're there right now, but they're playing too many minutes. So I do think that if they could find a way to obtain one or two bench players and kind of, keep this core intact, that's the main goal. But at the same time, you're going to see teams asking for a lot in return for those players that are available.
And then you pay it like that. You have to pay it because, in my opinion, like what happened the last two trade deadlines can't happen again. I understand 2 years ago getting Kessler Edwards, that being it, because that team was hot. I defended the move at the time, or the decision to stay put. Ride with that team, right? That was the Beam team year. That was the year that they were playing so well. It ended up working. The Kings came out of the All-Star break red hot, secured that seed. We all know what happened in the playoffs, but I was fine with that. And even running it back that offseason, bringing back Harrison Barnes, like I understood it. Last trade deadline, you didn't do anything. And what killed you was not just that you didn't do anything, but it's that the teams around you did. And you have the Dallas Mavericks, who literally turned their season around because of the trade deadline and made an NBA Finals run. I'm not saying the Kings are going to do that by making moves, but you got to play defense in the trade market as well as playing offense. You play defense by making sure that the Golden State Warriors don't get better by getting Finney-Smith or Cam Johnson or both. You make sure that these teams don't have the assets available or the availability to make these big trades that could bring Jimmy Butler out west again, right? Like the Kings have to be aware that they are competing with all these teams, not just to land these players, but to keep those players out of their hands. The Kings still play the Warriors 4 times this season. One of those 4 times is coming up, But you let them go out and get any of these guys, then you lose to them 3 out of the next 4 times. Yeah, you're in trouble standings wise. So I understand Monty's been a patient general manager, and I give him a ton of credit for it. And if you also look at Monty's track record, when it's felt like he has to make a move, he's done it. He made the Domantas Sabonis trade. He went out and got DeMar DeRozan. So track record says he's going to do something when he has to do something. But there's no doubt in my mind, regardless of how this next stretch goes, you have to do something. I think this stretch will decide the severity of that move and how extreme you need to be with making that decision. But I just don't think, like, as good as this core is, I don't think you can trust them or put it all on the starting 5 to carry you back into the playoffs in the West and then carry you to a playoff series win without bolstering this rotation, and more specifically, giving Mike Brown some of the guys that can actually do the job that he's challenging this team to do. Like, your roster is your roster, and I'm not saying these guys aren't capable of being pushed to do better on the defensive end, but go out and get some damn defenders. And if it's going to cost you something, go out and spend it. No one is going to blame Monty for trying and failing. I will blame Monty more if he sits on his hands waiting for the perfect deal while he gets lapped in the Western Conference again and again and again.
Yeah, and like, look, credit to the moves that he has made. I think that the Sabonis move for sure. I mean, you can slice it however you want from an outside perspective. I think any Kings fan will tell you that they feel strongly that that move was the right move for this team, and I think they're a better team for it. The jury's gonna be out on that forever, probably, but that's the way I view it. The DeRozan move so far that has had ups and downs, mostly from the availability standpoint, but his scoring has been, I mean, look at last night. They don't win the game without DeMar DeRozan last night.
100%.
Last year, they lose that game 10 times out of 10 because Fox
100%.
had a bad night. Keegan Murray's not taking the initiative. Sabonis doing everything he can, scoring 30 and 20, and you win by 2 points. DeMar DeRozan
100%.
scoring 16 in the third quarter won that game. But at the same time, like, the fragility of that group, I mean, the Kings have lost DeMar DeRozan for a couple of games, Domantas Sabonis for a couple of games. They look completely lost, and they have really struggled in those games. That's when they hit their slide. This team is not able to operate without one of those players in that starting 5 able to play. Malik Monk missing time too, obviously, was huge. So just kind of using that for the rest of the year, you can't bank on that. You can't bank on these guys who are playing. I think 4 of those starters are in the top 10 or 12 of minutes per game right now. You can't bank on that going to game 82. You can't assume that De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis, DeRozan, Monk, Murray, all those guys are going to be available every night. If that's the case, yeah, maybe the Kings could make the playoffs with that core. You can't. Other teams around the league are so good, and the teams that are competing every year in the playoffs, because they have a 1 through 8, 1 through 9 rotation where they're able to give guys a breather. Not a long breather, mind you, but enough to where they're able to, be fully charged and able to produce at a high level. The Nuggets of the league. The Celtics, of course, are in a league of their own, but the Miami Heat find role players every year. Spoelstra and Riley have been cooking over there for over a decade now, but the Kings should be able to find that and use the assets they do have to make it so where they can have DeMar DeRozan take a breather. De'Aaron Fox have to play 40 minutes per game. Domantas Sabonis take a second after getting hit in the face 20 times a night. They've done a good job of defending the paint this year, so that's nice that Sabonis has had to kind of take a breather on that end of the floor, but you have to round out the roster at some point. And, like, again, Monty McNair, seats the warmest right now. I mean, when you kind of get to the point with some of these guys that are GMs, this is kind of a time where they do make it, where they're kind of like iffy on their future, and time to push all the chips in and just see what you have with this group. You've built this core. You got Malik Monk here. You brought in DeMar DeRozan. De'Aaron Fox, people thought he was going to be traded the year that the Halliburton-Sabonis trade happened. You extended Sabonis. You drafted Keegan Murray. What is next? Like, do you want this group to take the next step or not? The time is now. And you know what? That's also a fine line to navigate, because he does have one more. I think he has one more year on his contract. But we know how this team operates. We know when things get bad. We heard things even the last week or two. Like, things were getting dicey around the Kings right now. They're very tight, very tense. So again, the upcoming 8-9 game stretch, can't overstate how much you've already laid it out, how important it is. I think when we come, sit down January 10th, and if we talk again, I might be dealing with father duties at that point. But I'm sure we'll be having a conversation of, okay, they pulled it off. They put themselves in position to go on a run the rest of the way with this group, or time to hit that big button and start making some moves, because they're kind of they're in some bad waters here.
This episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all of the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college sports, you name it, they got it, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Well, there's no question all 5 of the Kings starters, aka their core, are being asked to do a tremendous amount, especially your 2 non-stars of that core, which are Malik Monk and Keegan Murray. I mean, I genuinely don't think anybody's being asked to do more on this roster than Keegan Murray is. That includes Domantas Sabonis, who does so much. But I think Keegan Murray, as the only guy really at his position at an NBA level, like he's the one being asked to do almost everything. That being said, Keegan, I think, has proven that this year with this team, he's far more into the role player category than he is into a star category. He's just not ready. He's just not there yet. Malik Monk can be a game changer and has been a game changer for the Sacramento Kings and arguably is one of their 3 most important players with the way he plays. But Malik isn't necessarily in that star quality that Fox, DeRozan, and Sabonis are. So we look at those 3. Again, all 3 of them being asked to do a tremendous amount for this team. Is there any one of them that the Kings can or should be asking more from in your mind?
I think asking more from Fox is really just kind of unfair, but at the same time, like you look at last night and, if he wants to be a superstar and get that Supermax money, which I think a lot of people believe, he has to be able to kind of turn in those, not to compare him to SGA, but kind of like that leap that he made. And I think that Fox has shown stretches of that kind of ability, but just that kind of reliance on, what you can pen it in, not pencil it in, pen him in for nearly 30 points per night. It's pretty rare when a player like that has an off night. And that wasn't a joke for Davion Mitchell. Hope he's doing well in Toronto. I think he is. But I think Fox really just kind of being more consistent would be huge for this team. I think DeRozan is going to do what he does. I think that he's pretty. You can go ahead and pencil him in for 20 every night. Sabonis is going to get a double-double every night. That's guaranteed. Keegan Murray from 3. December, for whatever reason, is the best month of his career so far, and he's holding up to that so far. He's shooting 40% over the past 5 games from 3. Kings are 4-1 in those games. So, like, those numbers are starting to kind of turn around. Malik Monk right now in a new position. The ball movement is there. So I think when you look at kind of where everybody is right now, it kind of goes back to Fox. Fox is the head of a snake. The Kings will go as far as De'Aaron Fox will take them, in my opinion. And I do think that if he's playing his basketball at a high level every night, the Kings are a very, very hard team to beat. And that kind of gives guys like Monk, DeRozan, Sabonis a little bit of leeway. And like I mentioned a few minutes ago with DeRozan, like having players like that make it easier for Fox to have a bad night. But, you don't want to make a habit of it. And I don't think Fox necessarily has, but there's been times with DeRozan and Fox both on the floor that maybe Fox has struggled to get to his spots more, or maybe hasn't had the ball in his hands as much, and that's not entirely his fault. But when the ball is in his hands, and he's able to control the game and kind of set the tone. I think he's got to be the guy that gets it done. And if he can do that and play at a high level, not only will he get the accolades like all NBA and all-star, those things that he really doesn't really care about, at least not outwardly or not with us he cares about, but I'm sure part of him does as a competitor in him. I think that definitely he could take one more leap. I think there's still an aspect of De'Aaron Fox's game that has been untapped, and that's very cool and exciting for the Kings. But at the same time, you want to see that happen while he's still here. And, we'll see what happens with his contract situation, but this is a prime opportunity for him to earn that Supermax. And he was playing like that before a couple of weeks ago and even more recently. But I want to see him do it with everybody on the floor, with DeRozan on the floor, Malik Monk in his new role. Can he still be that guy and that head of a snake? And I think that he can.
I agree with you that it's Fox. And yes, there is certainly an element of that that's unfair. I think bringing up SGA is fine. I think bringing up Jalen Brunson is fine. I think bringing up John Morant is fine, because with these 3 guys, when you watch their teams play, unquestioned, they are the best players out there. And they also have this attitude of, you're not beating me tonight. And we've seen Fox, he can have that attitude before, like when he has that attitude, it's like the whole pissed off De'Aaron Fox thing. I did a podcast not too long ago where I was questioning, like, is it getting to a point where this is actually a bad thing, that the Kings need to piss De'Aaron Fox off or get a pissed off version of Fox for him to play at that level that we know that he's capable of playing? But on the other side of that coin, I think Fox has done a tremendous job and doesn't get enough credit for the incorporation of DeMar DeRozan, making sure Domantas Sabonis is more aggressive and looking for his shot more, trying to get Keegan going, inviting Malik Monk into the starting lineup. Fox has done a really good job adapting his game to fit those guys. Now, he's still leading the team in shot attempts, which is good. And there are times where it's like, De'Aaron, don't be passive. Go and take over. DeMar is there to help you. Sabonis is there to help you. Everybody's there to help you. You're the head of the snake. But the numbers show, like, look, the fewest amount of points De'Aaron scored in a game this season is 14. He's had 15 games where he scored 23 or more points. But when you look at the games where he's 22 points or less, 5 assists, 7 assists, 8 assists, 8 assists, 9 assists, 9 assists, 11 assists, 8 assists, 6 assists. So typically when he's not scoring the basketball, he's distributing at a high level. So I think that is a sign of, it's not De'Aaron being passive. It's not De'Aaron not turning it on. It's De'Aaron, just like the Kings in general, trying to figure out and incorporate everybody. And I think what we've seen over this 4-1 stretch, Frankie, is, especially in the case of DeMar DeRozan, the Kings are figuring out when to play their basketball as a team and when to highlight the strengths of others. And I think we're especially seeing the Kings are learning when to execute their half-court DHO and pick-and-roll offense, and then when to give the ball to DeRozan and say, go and get us a bucket. They're figuring that out. And I think it's good that we're finally starting to see that, like, let's say 21 games into DeMar actually playing for the Kings.
Yeah, and like that's the crazy part is like it not that the season's still early in it. I guess from the whole landscape of the whole season, I guess it's quote unquote early still. We're not even, I think 100%. We're just over a quarter of the way in, and like you said, DeRozan missed some time, and we've seen that kind of them play off each other though. Like that Phoenix game was maybe the most fun game of the year, where they had that fourth quarter comeback and Fox and DeRozan took turns kind of taking over.
Right.
I guess maybe like, from an individual standpoint, yeah, Fox is making a difference as far as getting teammates involved or attempting to get teammates involved, where DeRozan maybe some night doesn't have it, or he gets DeRozan involved and the shots don't fall, like that game in Toronto. Granted, DeRozan was big in that game down the stretch, but I'm talking about in crunch time with the game on the line, taking the final shots. But I do want to see more of what we saw in Phoenix. Them kind of playing off each other, being that, being a two-headed snake, not just the one-headed snake. Let's see you both be a problem late in games. And I think we haven't really seen the Kings play against too many formidable, strong opponents. And that's kind of the aspect of the season that I'm looking forward to seeing. The Nuggets and the Lakers, who've been going through their own struggles on their own. But I think that the fact that the Kings, and not to rain on the parade, but about a quarter of their wins this year are against the Utah Jazz. So seeing them, put this offense in action against teams that are around them in the standings will be interesting to see how they adapt. And they played the Phoenix Suns pretty well so far this year. But it's a long road to the finish line. And we have to see if they can do that if they can play off each other and be that winning formula, in crunch time together, the Fox and DeRozan formula. That's what we all kind of envisioned coming into the year. And it's encouraging to see Fox be able to have those assist numbers go up when the shot's not falling. But I still go back to my point of De'Aaron Fox, if he wants to be that all NBA, that supermax player, there's got to be that extra gear that, like we saw against Minnesota or Houston, that bite, that edge. And the angry De'Aaron Fox part, I think, is true. I think that he does play better. I think someone pulled the numbers up. I don't have them in front of me, but I think he does play better after getting a technical in his career. It's kind of what we saw like from Boogie back in the day. I think that Fox plays better with a chip on his shoulder. So use that down the final stretch of the year and see if it can kind of, leak over into your teammates. But all things considered, the Kings, they're in a good spot with plenty of time left to go, but now they got to do it.
Well, we'll wrap up with this, Frankie. By the end of this stretch, by the end of these 11 games, 9 of them at home, I need the Sacramento Kings bare minimum to be in that 7th or 8th spot, which is home court advantage in the play-in. I don't care what the record is that gets them there, because let's say they're slightly above 500 and they're not there. that means there are teams that are even more above 500 that are still ahead of you and are harder to catch that you now have not taken full advantage of this stretch. I'm not going to give a win total. I'm not going to say the Kings need to win 8 of these 11 games or whatever. I have no idea. Whatever it takes to minimum be in that 8th or 7th spot. Because if they're not there, if they're below that, and this stretch of all these home games is gone with the difficulty of schedule after that and the amount of road games after that, even though for some reason this team plays better on the road, I'm going to be concerned about how much ground they can really, truly make up. This is the time to make up ground. This is the stretch to make up ground and make up spots in the standings and insert yourself firmly into that playoff pack. This is the time to do it. If you don't do it, I think you're going to be on the outside looking in.
2 games back of the 5 seed, which is surprising. I mean, 2 games back of the Warriors, who have cooled down significantly. I mean, the Buddy Hield project is, or the cycle is in, I think,
shocking
step 2 or 3, which is, I think, acceptance. So it is crazy that it's there for the taking, and they'll have no one to blame it themselves after everything that happened and how ugly the start of the year was. The fact that they're still almost a winning product is remarkable. It shows that they do have talent. And I think something in our YouTube comments, I think on one of our shows, they said today that this team has the most talent that of any team since 2004. And I think I agree. Like, this team does have they have the most talent. And yeah, it's all top heavy. It's in the starting 5, but the talent is talent. Like, and they have it. There's not really an excuse of, well, they have holes in this. When those 5 are on the floor, I think they could go up against anybody. And, yeah, there are teams that are better, certainly. But for what they're trying to accomplish, if they can keep that core healthy, there's no reason why they can't get to the playoffs, in my opinion. But like we've talked about this whole show so far, it's going to come down to depth, I think, in my opinion. It's going to come down to winning games that you, quote unquote, should win. And just kind of looking at the upcoming schedule, you got the Lakers a couple times, the Nuggets, the Pistons, the Pacers. I mean, it's a lot of games that are, quote unquote, winnable. So you don't have the Celtics are coming January 10th. The Nuggets are a tough matchup too, I guess. But I'm going to end it with the same thing I've said a couple times this show so far. It's right in front of them, Matt. It is right in front of them, sir.
Well, hopefully the Kings can actually get something done, unlike the Yankees this year. My man, Frankie, I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, Max Fried.
Congratulations. I'm happy for you. Best of luck in the Bronx. And the Kings are going to need all the luck that they can get inside the Golden One Center during this stretch. We'll see how they do. Frank, thanks for taking the time as usual, my man. Keep up the great work at SacTown Sports, and we'll do it again soon.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate the time, sir, and I'll see you for some chocolate chip cookies this week.